people think faith is what you use when logic runs out. They think faith begins where intelligence ends. But what if that idea is completely backwards? What if faith is not the absence of reason, but the highest form of it? Because here is something almost no one is taught. Every human being lives by faith, even those who claim they don't. The question is not whether you have faith. The question is where your faith is placed. Part 1. Why no human lives by proof alone. Let's start with something uncomfortable. No human being navigates reality by proof alone. You do not prove that the ground will hold you every time you take a step. You do not prove that language will mean the same thing tomorrow as it did yesterday. You do not prove that your memories are reliable before trusting them. You assume, you trust, you commit. That is not irrational. That is how intelligence works in a finite world. If you waited for total proof before acting, you would never act at all. Faith is not belief without evidence. Faith is commitment in the presence of incomplete information. And every decision you have ever made was based on that. Part 2. Faith is built into reality itself. Now watch this. Science itself does not function without faith. Scientists trust the consistency of natural laws, the reliability of observation, the coherence of mathematics, the intelligibility of the universe. None of those things can be proven by science. They are assumed before science begins. Science works because scientists believe reality is stable, rational, and discoverable. That belief is not scientific. It is philosophical. It is a form of faith. Which means faith does not oppose science, it precedes it. Logic itself rests on faith, faith that logic works. And if you deny that, you are still trusting your denial. Part 3. Why faith is not blind. Blind faith believes without reason. Biblical faith believes with sufficient reason. There is a difference between believing against evidence, believing beyond evidence. Faith does not say, I believe because there is no reason not to. Faith says, I believe because the pattern points somewhere. You trust a bridge not because you know everything about it, but because its design, history, and structure justify trust. That is intelligence, not ignorance. Faith is pattern recognition at the deepest level. It sees coherence where others only see fragments. Part 4. Belief shapes how reality is experienced. Now here is where this becomes dangerous and powerful. Belief does not just interpret reality. It shapes how reality is experienced. Two people can encounter the same event and live in entirely different worlds. Why? Because belief filters perception. This is not religious. This is neurological. Your brain does not passively receive reality. It predicts it. Expectation shapes experience. Meaning shapes attention. Belief shapes behavior. This is why fear multiplies suffering, why hope sustains endurance, why trust changes outcomes. Belief does not create reality, but it determines how reality is navigated. Faith is not fantasy. It is orientation. Part 5. Faith as strategy, not emotion. Most people confuse faith with feeling. That is a mistake. Faith is not emotional certainty. It is strategic trust. A general commits troops based on incomplete intelligence. A surgeon operates without absolute guarantees. A parent raises a child without knowing the outcome. These are not acts of ignorance. They are acts of informed commitment. Faith is intelligence operating under uncertainty. And here is the key insight. The greater the intelligence, the more it understands that certainty is limited. Faith is not for the unthinking. It is for those who understand the limits of thought. Part 6. Why faith precedes understanding. Understanding is not the doorway to faith. Faith is the doorway to understanding. You do not learn to swim by mastering hydrodynamics. You learn by entering the water. You do not learn a language by proving it works. You learn by trusting it enough to speak. Faith is participation before comprehension. That is not weakness. That is how learning actually happens. This is why Scripture says faith comes first. Not because God hates reason, but because reason needs a starting point. Faith is the starting point. Part 7. Faith and reality's deeper logic. Now, here is the deepest layer. If reality itself is ordered, intelligible, and meaningful, then faith in meaning is more rational than faith in meaninglessness. If consciousness exists, then trusting mind over matter is logical. If moral intuition exists, then trusting purpose over randomness is coherent. Faith is not believing something despite reality. It is believing something because reality consistently points in that direction. Atheism does not eliminate faith. It relocates it into chance, matter, and blind process. That is still faith. The only question is whether your faith aligns with the structure of reality. Part 8. Faith as alignment with truth. Biblical faith is not pretending. It is alignment. Alignment with order instead of chaos, meaning instead of absurdity, purpose instead of accident, intelligence instead of randomness. Faith does not deny evidence, it integrates it. Faith does not shut down thinking, it directs it. This is why faith produces courage, sacrifice, and endurance. Because faith is not belief without sight, it is trust before full sight. Faith is not the opposite of intelligence. It is intelligence that understands reality is bigger than proof. It is logic that recognizes that not everything meaningful can be measured. It is reason that refuses to collapse into despair just because certainty is limited. Faith is not believing something foolish. Faith is trusting what is most reasonable when all the evidence is considered, including the evidence of meaning, consciousness, order, and purpose. Faith is not blind. It sees further. And that is why belief does not weaken reality. It shapes how reality is lived. Part 9. Faith before proof. The invisible architecture of reality. Most people think faith is believing something without proof, but that definition is childish. Because the deepest human problem is not lack of evidence. It is the impossibility of total certainty. Even the most rational mind on Earth still lives inside a universe it cannot fully verify. And here is the first mind blow. You cannot prove reality is real. You assume it. Every day you wake up, you trust that your senses are not deceiving you. You trust that you are not dreaming. You trust that the world outside your mind is not an illusion. Science cannot prove that assumption. Science requires it. That is not religion. That is epistemology. Which means the first act of faith you ever made was not believing in God. It was believing the world exists. Now go deeper. You cannot prove your memory is accurate. You cannot prove the past happened exactly as you remember. You cannot prove you weren't manipulated, or that your mind hasn't rewritten your history. Yet you live as if your memory is trustworthy. Because without that trust, identity collapses. So the human mind does something extraordinary. It builds an entire life on invisible assumptions it cannot mathematically prove. That is not stupidity. That is intelligence navigating reality without collapsing into paralysis. Now watch this. Even logic itself is built on faith. Logic assumes its own laws are true. It assumes non-contradiction. It assumes consistency. It assumes that if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. But you cannot prove logic without circular reasoning. Meaning, logic is not self-justifying. It is accepted. It is trusted. And the moment you accept it, you are already standing inside faith. This is why atheism does not eliminate faith. It simply relocates it. Atheism still believes. Reality is coherent. Reason is reliable. Mathematics is universal. Consciousness is explainable. Morality is emergent. Existence is accidental, yet meaningful enough to study. That is not neutrality. That is a belief system with assumptions. Now here is the second mind blow. The most powerful form of intelligence is not proof. It is orientation. Because proof tells you what is true in a lab. Orientation tells you what is true in life. A scientist can prove chemical reactions, but cannot prove loyalty, cannot prove love, cannot prove purpose, cannot prove why sacrifice is noble, cannot prove why beauty moves the soul. And yet these are the things that govern human civilization. You do not marry based on proof. You marry based on trust. You do not raise children based on certainty. You raise them based on hope. You do not build a future by evidence alone. You build it by commitment to a vision that does not yet exist. That is faith. Now here is the third mind blow. Your brain does not experience reality directly. It predicts it. Neuroscience has shown that perception is not a camera. It is a model. Your mind constructs the world based on expectation, meaning, and prior belief. You are not seeing the world as it is. You are seeing the world as your brain believes it is. Which means belief is not an opinion you hold. Belief is the architecture of your perception. And that means faith is not just spiritual. Faith is neurological. It is the operating system that determines what you notice, what you fear, what you pursue, and what you become. This is why two people can live in the same city, under the same government, under the same sky, and one lives in despair, while the other lives in purpose. Their world is the same. Their belief is not. Now the final mind blow. If belief shapes perception, then faith is not the opposite of reality. It is the gateway to reality. Because without faith, you cannot even interpret experience. You cannot interpret suffering. You cannot interpret death. You cannot interpret injustice. You cannot interpret love. You cannot interpret meaning. You simply endure sensations. Faith is not denial of evidence. Faith is the decision that evidence is not the highest category of truth. Because some truths are not measured, they are recognized. Like beauty, like morality, like meaning, like consciousness, like the haunting sense that existence is not accidental. This is why Scripture does not call faith irrational. It calls it sight. Because faith is not believing what is false. Faith is recognizing that reality contains layers that material measurement cannot reach. And once you understand that, you realize something terrifying. The most dangerous people are not the religious. The most dangerous people are those who think they have no faith, because they are blind to the assumptions governing their lives. Faith is not optional. The only question is whether your faith is aligned with truth or aligned with illusion. And that is why faith is not weakness. It is intelligence that understands reality is deeper than proof.